The rain was freezing, and Isabella Costello was already out of the family before she reached the end of the foyer. Marco hadn't removed her engagement ring. He'd ripped it off in front of everyone. He dropped the diamond into champagne and handed it to Sienna like I was the mess. Vincent Costello sighed, told her to go to her room, and let the locks answer for him. There would be no room for her now. He didn't look toward the driveway. Didn't look toward her at all.
The locks are engaged. They won't open for you again. Get in.
I have nothing.
You have me, and I have everything. Your family doesn't want you? Then you'll be the only one I ever marry. The whole continent will rule for you. Kneel Beeling, kneel for you now.
I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was just cold. Fine. For the first time in her life, Isabella Costello was not afraid of the dark. The heater blew against Isabella's ankles while her old life shrunk in the rearview mirror. Dante Volkov said nothing. He let silence do the claiming.
You're bleeding. Leave it. Use that, not your hands.
His hands were calloused. Not a man who only signed orders, a man who enforced them. Why me?
You didn't scream, you didn't beg, you just stood there and took it. Most people break. You calcified. That's useful.
They're calling.
Let them.
Sir.
Mrs. Volkov, see to my wife's comfort.
Yes, Godfather. Wife was not tenderness in his mouth. It was title, protection, war. She stepped forward without looking back again. The bathroom was larger than Isabella's old closet, but it felt less like luxury than... The sweater smelled like cedar and smoke, like Dante.
Coffee. Mr. Volkov requests your presence in the study when you're ready.
Wait. Who are you?
Anton, security.
He wasn't storming the gates. He was waiting to be noticed. Pathetic.
Bella. Thank God. We've been so worried. Marco...
Sienna! Silence. Your husband is at the gate.
He's not my husband.
Bella, please. Come home. We can fix this. Marco didn't mean...
He didn't mean to what? Tear my ring off? Lock me out? Put my mother's necklace on you?
It was a mistake. A misunderstanding.
It was a choice.
Tell him to leave.
Anton, open the gate. Let the Rossi vehicle enter. Then escort him back out. Immediately. He is not to set foot on Volkov's soil. If he resists, break his legs slowly.
Understood, sir.
You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises. Mrs. Volkov will escort you out. If you ever set foot near my wife again, I will have your tongue.
Bella, tell him! Tell him I'm sorry!
I'm not sorry.
Even the rain seemed to pause for that.
Delete my number, Marco.
He already did. Now he's gonna learn what it costs to dial the wrong one. Mine. She watched Marco back into the dark, and for the first time, she did not want to follow.
Sleep belonged to people who still had something to lose. Isabella had a laundered handkerchief, a black room, and whatever Dante Volkov chose to show her next.
Mr. Volkov requests you review these. Page 17, the signature.
Marco's spending was familiar, so were the lies hiding under it. The shape was mine. The hand was not. $2 million a month, 4 months, $8 million gone through a ghost company wearing her name. The rehearsal dinner scandal hadn't only been humiliation. It was cover. If Isabella disappeared in disgrace, the forged transfers would keep speaking for her.
Page 17.
Ethelred Consulting, registered in Malta, owned through the Caymans and Luxembourg. Difficult to trace.
Not impossible.
No, just difficult.
It's mine, but it's not.
I know. Anton ran forensics. The pressure factories don't match your known samples. The loop on the B is 17 degrees off. The forger was good, but they weren't you.
Sienna Costello has been transferring $8 million a month out of Rossi accounts for 4 months. She bought properties in 3 states, liquidated them, converted the funds to cryptocurrency. She's also been paying 3 of the 5 families on the regional commission. Sienna wasn't just stealing money. She was buying influence and preparing a collapse.
And Marco?
Marco thinks you did it. He thinks you planned to flee with his money and your lover. He thinks Sienna's video proved it.
He didn't ask for the original footage?
He didn't want to, believing you would force him to admit he was a fool. Marco Rossi cannot afford to be a fool.
Where is she now?
Safe house in Queens. Under surveillance. She thinks she's won. Next, she marries Marco, consolidates the territories, and in 18 months arranges his accident.
She signed my name like she was signing a death warrant.
I want you to watch. I want you to see what happens to people who touch what's mine. And when you're ready, I want you to sign your name. Properly this time, on the documents that will erase the Rossos from the map.
It's not just my name, it's my mother's handwriting. Sienna's been studying her old letters, copying her too.
Even better. Isa blocked out with the photo under her arm and the first real shape of revenge in her hands.
By dawn, Isabella had memorized every stolen dollar. 32 million total. Not because the number mattered more than the insult, but because the insult had a pattern. Sienna hadn't only stolen her name. She desecrated her mother's memory to do it.
The Rossi family ledger.
The official one is a lie. This is the real one. She had kept it since she was 16. Every bribe, every payoff, every legitimate deal.
Open it.
I'm not a Costello anymore. I'm your liability. Use me.
You knew.
I knew.
You said nothing.
He wouldn't have listened. He would have called it business.
You're not a liability. You're the key.
Anton traced Sienna's digital trail to a server farm in Reykjavik. She used the same encryption key every time. The one she found in your mother's old correspondence.
She thought she was smart, coppering my mother's signature, using her codes. She didn't realize she was leaving breadrooks only I could follow.
Because they weren't her codes. They were yours. You taught her to read them.
I thought we were sisters.
You're not sisters. You're the architect. She's the vandal who broke into your house and pissed on the floors.
Use me.
Starting with the high table next month, we're going to show them what happens when you steal from a Volkov. And we're going to use your pretty little notebook to do it. The handkerchief. Mrs. Volkov said you kept it. Why?
Because it was mine, before it was yours.
Keep it, but burn the gown, the shoes, everything else they gave you. From now on, you wear what I give you. You sign what I tell you, and you watch what I destroy.
Something settled into place inside her then. Not a snap, not a break, a lock turning. She no longer cared about Marco's excuses or Sienna's envy. She cared about the notebook, the power in it, and the man who saw her not as a victim, but as a weapon. Mrs. Volkov didn't bring breakfast. She brought armor.
Mr. Volkov requires your presence in the East Wing. 1 hour.
The East Wing didn't feel like a home. It felt like the unscabony inside of a mind that trusted data more than people.
Close the door, Isabella. Your office, effective immediately.
I don't need an office.
You need access to the systems, to the intelligence, to the money.
I don't have time to hold your hand. I need you to find a traitor before he opens his mouth. I need you to see a pattern in a spreadsheet that would take my men 3 days to decipher. I need you to be useful, Isabella, constantly. The gown was a costume. The ring was a prop. This is real. This is power.
He wasn't giving her comfort. He was giving her targets.
Biometric locks on all sensitive files. Voice recognition, retina scan. Only you and Mr. Volkov have clearance.
She's nervous.
She should be.
Sienna was still moving money, while pretending she had already won.
Access granted. Project Nighthale.
Project Nighthale?
Your mother's code name. For her work with the agency, she was the best they had, until she fell in love with a Costello and retired. Wasted talent. That's your inheritance, Isabella. Not a diamond ring, not a title. This. The ability to see where the money flows. To know who to squeeze, and when. Freeze Sienna's Reykjavik account quietly. Make it look like a system error. Then draft an anonymous memo to the commission on Marco's uncle. Just enough evidence to make him sweat. Not enough to hang him yet. You have 1 hour.
Somewhere in Rukivo, an alarm was going off. Sienna would call it a glitch. Isabella called it the first lock turning. The information itself would be the signature. She didn't feel anger. She felt focus. The static was gone. The numbness had become useful. At 10:47, the memo vanished into 12 inboxes. At 10:52, Sienna's frozen account started screaming.
Mr. Volki is in the motor port. There's been an incident. Marco Rossi's men crossed the Tripon Bridge, 4 SUVs, 16 armed men. He heading for the old shipyards.
And Mr. Volki's response?
He said, let them.
That answer told Isabella everything she needed to know. This wasn't defense, it was instruction.
Zoom in. Lead vehicle plate. Marco's personal registration. The same digits as her mother's Swiss account. He liked symbols he didn't understand.
Tell him I'm coming down.
Mr. Volkov says she can watch from the roof.
They're almost there. Nervous?
No.
Good. Marco thinks this is a negotiation. It's a test. For you. I want to see if you flinch when the first shot is fired, or if you just note the trajectory. Execute. Dante didn't need a massacre. He needed mathematics. 16 men looking at a problem they could not survive. Well?
Marco isn't in the lead vehicle, he's in the second one. Back seat. Curtain drawn. He wanted plausible deniability if this went wrong.
Go on.
If he were a real leader, he'd be in front taking the first hit. He's hiding. He'll apologize, blame Sienna, ask for a way out, don't negotiate.
I wasn't planning to. Tell me why.
Because Marco Rossi thinks power is territory and guns. Real power decides whether the territory exists at all.
Leave the second vehicle. Disable the engine, the radio, the windows. Let him sit there until sunset.
Understood.
He already called his uncle. His uncle didn't answer. He's reading your memo. The world was realigning itself according to its true weights, and for once, Marco Rossi was not one of them.
East Wing access. You don't need Mrs. Volkov to escort you anymore. And next time, don't ask to come to the roof, just be here.
She felt nothing for him. Not pity, not rage. Only the quiet certainty that this was the beginning.
By lunch, Sienna Costello had found a podium. Of course she had.
I stand before you today not as a member of the Rossi family, but as a concerned citizen. And as someone who cares deeply for Isabella Costello's well-being.
She was selling tragedy now. Isabella's disappearance, Isabella's instability, Isabella's memory.
Isabella is not well. She hasn't been for some time. The paranoia, the erratic behavior, the financial decisions that made no sense. I am stepping forward today to announce the Isabella Costello Mental Health Foundation to honor her memory.
Sienna had turned thief into philanthropy and Isabella's sanity into a fundraising tool.
Even her lies were paid for with stolen money. She couldn't breathe without embezzling first.
Patch the press conference audio into the SUV, low volume, just enough for him to hear her voice.
Done.
Miss Costello, is there any truth to the rumors Isabella was involved in embezzlement?
Isabella couldn't embezzle a paper partner. She could barely balance her own checkbook. Liar. The audit would show whatever Sienna needed it to show. Panic leaves fingerprints, too.
Tell Anton to cut the audio feed. Let Marco sit in silence for the next hour. Then give him 1 bottle of water. No food, no messages, just the water. Yes, ma'am.
Sienna thought she was winning. Marco thought he was suffering. Neither understood the game had changed the moment Isabella stepped into Dante's car. She was done watching. Tomorrow, she would move the pieces herself. At 5 in the morning, Mrs. Volkov did not bring coffee. She brought a summons. The hour of the wolf meant 3 a.m. in their world. The darkest hour, the hour for ghosts and panic. They weren't giving Marco time to prepare. They were giving him time to break. She did not check the live feed. She didn't need to see him begging to know he was still trapped.
The table is early.
Not early. Desperate. Marco's uncle spent the night begging on secure lines. He offered Sienna on a platter. Said Marco was a victim of feminine wiles. Would you?
No. A victim who believes his own lies is more dangerous than a liar who knows the truth. If Marco lives, he'll spend the rest of life calling himself the wronged party. He'll come for us again.
Correct. The table agrees. They're here to witness the execution, not to debate it.
In 10 minutes, they'll be in the Grand Salon. In 15, Marco will be brought to the antechamber. He won't enter the main hall yet. He'll be displayed. He'll sit at my right hand.
You won't speak unless spoken to. You won't react to anything Marco or Sienna says. You'll watch. You'll listen.
And when I give the signal, you'll produce the evidence.
Your wedding ring. Let them see you're not the discarded daughter. You're the Volkov wife, the only one I've ever acknowledged. Let them wonder what it cost me to put that ring on your finger, and what it'll cost them to take it off.
She looked less like a bride than a widow, or an executioner.
Save your thanks for after. After the table sees the truth, after Marco understands what he lost, after Sienna realizes her foundation is built on quicksand.
Thank you.
Mr. Volkov, Mrs. Volkov, the table is assembled.
Let's begin.
The Grand Salon smelled of beeswax and old money, and silence weighed more than any threat spoken inside it.
Your summoned affair was immediate attention.
The Marco Rossi has been embezzling from his own family, laundering money through Aethra Consulting, and conspiring with his uncle to hide the theft.
And the girl? Sienna Costello? Marco claims she is the architect of this deception.
Sienna Costello is a thief. She forged my signature on the transfer orders, used a cipher stolen from my mother's correspondence, and funneled the money into personal accounts while preparing to flee.
You speak with authority, Mrs. Volkov. But you are newlywed and recently displaced. How do we know this is not bitterness?
Permission, not rescue.
I know because I built this. Every entry. Every transaction. For 3 years, I managed the Rossi finances. I coded the encryption. I tracked the anomalies, including the $8 million Sienna moved through Aethra Consulting in the last 4 months. She didn't just steal from the Rossis. She stole my identity. This is where the money went. Malta, the Caymans, Luxembourg, all traced back to Yekanovec.
Convenient. New husband, new title, new accusations. How do we know you didn't forge this yourself?
You don't know. You believe or you don't. Belief does not change facts. Marco Rossi is a liability. His uncle is Sienna Costello is a cancer. They weakened the regional structures, invited Urid scrutiny as table. I weakened fools this bait. Hudge will be stripped if he sees his uncle will be executed dawn. Sienna Costello will confess publicly. Then she will disappear.
And if we refuse, if we demand a trial, due process?
You won't. If you do, I withdraw Volkov protection from every family here. I close the borders. I freeze the accounts. I let the Europeans pick your bones clean. You have 5 seconds to decide.
The table sanctions the purge.
There is no God here.
Mrs. Volkov,
Bring in the first witness.
Bella! Please! Tell them it's not true! Tell them I didn't...
Look at your wife, Marco. Look at her ring. Look at her face. Then tell me again who you love. You never loved her. You loved the title, the stability, the money. Now that she's mine, you realize you never had her at all. Take him away. Lock him in the basement. No food, no water, no light, until the execution. Sienna Costello will be brought in at midnight. She will confess. Then she will disappear. The Rossi territories are absorbed into the Volkov portfolio effective immediately. Any objections? No one speaks. No one even shifts.
Midnight came without moonlight, and Sienna Costello did not enter like a guest. She hit the room like a crash.
You lying, treacherous bitch! You think marrying this foreigner makes you a queen? You're nothing!
Sienna had not come to survive. She had come to perform one last delusion.
I have the video, the one I showed Marco, the one of you with your lover, and the bank records. I sent them to the table. The truth is out!
Enough. He did not shout. He did not need to. You claim to have proof. Show it to me.
Here, watch it, you'll see. She's a liar!
Mrs. Volkov, if you would.
This is your proof?
Yes, it's you!
It's a composite. The lighting is wrong. The man's watch is a Rolex Subgermainer. My husband owns one, Marco never did. And the woman's ear isn't pierced. Mine is. The file was altered 3 weeks ago at 2:17 a.m. from a coffee shop on Lexington Avenue. You met a freelance editor named Leo Vance there and paid him $5,000 in cash. You used my mother's cipher, but you didn't understand it. It carries a check sap, a digital signature.
The check sap.
You changed the numbers after the fact, and the check sap broke. That break is your fingerprint. It's on the video, it's on the bank records, it's on every piece of proof you forged.
Get up. You wanted to sit at this table, to be acknowledged, to be feared. Mrs. Volsky, show her the rest.
Marco, help me.
He won't help you. He can't, because he's already dead. And soon, so will you be. Confess.
I did it at the video. I stole the money. I used the cipher. I wanted it all. The name, the power, the respect. I hated her. I wanted to be her.
She has confessed. The purge is complete. Sienna Costello is hereby exiled. Her name is stricken from all records. Her existence is erased. Let no one speak of her again.
You did well.
Sienna was gone. Marco was finished. And Isabella was only beginning.
Dawn had not broken when Dante took Isabella to a room she had never seen before. A vault. Small, steel, blue lit, final.
Speak to him, or don't, your choice. But he needs to hear your voice one last time before he forgets it.
Marco.
His eyes were the worst part. Not angry, not proud, empty.
Your ring. It's not the one I gave you.
No, it's not.
I'm sorry, I didn't know. Sienna said...
You didn't think. You didn't ask. You didn't verify. You saw what was easiest to believe, and you believed it because it served you.
I loved you. I swear.
Love doesn't tear rings off fingers. Love doesn't lock people out in the rain. Love doesn't believe forgeries over 3 years of fidelity. What you felt for me was ownership.
Please, can you forgive me?
The love she had once carried for him was gone so completely it left no heat behind, only ash.
I don't forgive you. Forgiveness implies I care enough to grant it. I don't. You're not worth the energy it would take to hate you. You're just irrelevant.
I'm done.
Marco Rossi, you are stripped of all titles, all assets, and all protections. You are exiled from Volkov territory and all affiliated families. Your name is struck from all records. Your existence died. You have died. You are to become a ghost. Take him. Leave him at the edge of the city, naked. Let him find his own way.
This is the key to the vault. You did well tonight, not just this room. The entire financial network, the codes, the ciphers, the keys to the kingdom. It's yours now because you're not just my wife, you're my partner, my equal. The only person I've ever trusted with the truth.
From this day forward, there is no Volkov empire without you, and no you without the Volkov name. We are one, in power, in purpose, in blood. Welcome home.
The girl in the rain was gone. In her place stood a woman with a ring, a key, and a kingdom built on cold truths. 3 hours after the purge, Dante flew to Geneva. Isabella stayed behind with the servers, the key, and the remains of the Rossi Empire blinking red across her screens. She had no intention of burning anything down. Burning was messy. She preferred dissolving.
No signature required. The key in her pocket was signature enough.
She did not threat them. She made survival mathematically dependent on obedience. Then she redirected every donation into a Volkov-controlled recovery account. Where? Staten Island, near the old refinery. He crawled 2 miles before collapsing. No ID, no witnesses.
And the coat?
Buried with him, as a pillow.
Marco's death was not dramatic. It was administrative. Exposure, disposal, erasure. Marco's empire had been a leaking bucket. She plugged the holes and filled it with lead.
The men are calling you La Vecchia Regina, the new queen.
Tell them a queen doesn't shout. She calculates, and when she's finished calculating, she lets the numbers speak.
Sentiment is a luxury for those who can afford to be wrong. I cannot. The cleanum was complete. The work was not. 6 months changed the skyline less than it changed Isabella. From the Volkov penthouse, the city looked organized now.
The Sicilians accepted the terms. The shipment routes are ours. The ports are secure. Anton reports 0 incidents.
Good. They did not use meals for comfort. They used them to recalibrate.
You're not eating.
I'm not hungry. He knew hunger was a distraction she often ignored. The Hamptons properties are data relays now. Coastal interference was slowing the Baltic node by 11%.
Efficient.
Sienna's foundation is still redirecting donations, 400,000 so far. I moved it to the children's wing of the Volkov Medical Center under the name The Forgotten.
Poetic.
Accurate.
Marco's death certificate processed. Cause exposure. No next of kin. The file is sealed.
Burn it. 6 months, and the name Rossi had become paperwork. That was the cleanest revenge of all. I saw Marco yesterday. In the quarterly asset report, the photo from Staten Island was attached. I looked at his face for a full minute. I didn't recognize him.
Good.
Free. Because she no longer needed anyone else to understand what survival had cost her. She did not look back. She did not need to. Behind her, Dante's footsteps matched her own. A shadow behind her shadow.